Thank you, Dr. Hussain. So I'd like to invite the panelists to please come up to the front. While they're doing that, I'll introduce myself. My name is Yasser Islam. I'm Head of Communications for Harvest Plus, and I'll be moderating the question and answer session. And we'll wrap that up at around 1:40, and then Dr. Shang Fan will give some closing remarks. So we hope you're thinking about some questions to ask. So we have Keith and Ikram have the microphones, and we'll cover different sides of the room. If you could state your affiliation, please, and keep your question brief. And we'll do that. We'll take some from online. I'm going to go question by question because while IFPRI may be 40, I will soon be turning 50, and so my memory's not the same. I can't remember questions that far back. So we'll try going one at a time, and we'll line up the next. Who's got the second question? We'll just line them up with the microphone right there. Please.
Thank you. I'm John Coonrod with the Hunger Project, and I'm curious about the sort of the socialization time of these different biofortified foods. How once farmers start producing it, what kind of time frame do you see before you see real measurable dietary diversity changes at the household level across a population?
Do you want to take that? Well, one thing the one example where we have very hard data, we did the dissemination of orange sweet potato in Uganda and Mozambique. We did a baseline survey. We introduced the orange sweet potato, and we did a follow-up survey after 2 years. Vitamin A intake during that period, they adopted the orange sweet potato, they ate the orange sweet potato, vitamin A intakes increased anywhere between 80 and 100% because of that. Namakulo then described a situation where an IFPRI researcher then went back 2 years later after the follow-up survey, so 4 years after introduction, and found a 50% reduction in diarrhea in the intervention villages as compared with the control villages. So it shows that very quickly they adopt the varieties and they can increase their nutrient intake significantly.
Second question over there.
Yeah, my name is Joseph Banikon from the International Medical Corps. I would like to find out from the panelists in their experience how they have overcome the initial resistance of farmers to adopting the cultivation of these biofortified varieties.
Okay. Anna Marie, do you want to?
Is it on? What is this? Are you hearing me? Yeah. Okay. Actually, farmers generally don't resist trying a new crop or a new variety because that's really what it is. It's a new variety. I think farmers are incredibly courageous in that way, and I have been most impressed. With the biofortified crops, though, one of the things that we do very deliberately is that we open our interactions with nutritional information. So when we go in with the sweet potato or the maize or the cassava, for example, we say this crop has vitamin A in it, and it's a different color. And vitamin A is needed for this, this, and this in your body, and you can grow this in your garden. And that seems to be enough. With the beans, there's no change in color. You don't know that there's more iron, so it's just a different variety, and you get the added benefit, the plus of the iron.
Please, if you'd introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, sure. I'm John McMurdy. I'm from USAID. My question is about the partnership with the Zambian seed companies. Has there been any sales of the biofortified maize yet? And if so, has there been any inkling of any price premiums they wanted to charge on it? And second, with these companies, Kamano and Zamseed, have they done any of their own marketing on these varieties, or are they just relying on what Harvest Plus has done to create awareness?
Take that.
Yes, seed has been sold, and it is the grain has been bought as well. And if we went back to one of the pictures of products, you would have seen on the right-hand side two bags of the milled maize, one as flour and the other one as grits. And so that's now in the supermarkets. And to my understanding, yes, the seed companies have been doing their own advertising and promoting, and of course taking advantage of the activities that have been coordinated with Harvest Plus. I don't believe so, because they've wanted to keep it in line with their other products.
Okay, there's a question up here. We'll take one from the back there, and then we'll come to you. Okay, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Joy Havalosa from the Embassy of the Philippines. I'd like to know where your focus countries are for scaling up, and perhaps if you could share the experience in the role of national governments to the success of scaling up. Thank you.
Want to speak to that
Yeah,
in
sure.
as well?
Okay.
Yeah, particularly the agriculture departments.
Yeah. So we have 8 target countries where we have country managers, and we're raising money to promote the scale up of biofortified crops. So in South Asia, it's the high zinc rice in Bangladesh, it's high zinc wheat in Pakistan, and then in India we have 3 crops: high zinc wheat, high zinc rice, and high iron pearl millet. Now when you move over to Africa, Nigeria is high provitamin A cassava, high provitamin A maize. DR Congo, high provitamin A cassava, high iron beans. Rwanda, high iron beans. Zambia, provitamin A maize. And in Uganda, provitamin A sweet potato and high iron beans. Now, obviously we don't want to just work in those 8 countries. We want to work in other countries as well. So we call those partnership countries. And we're doing multi-location testing in 50 partnership countries now, and we're getting releases of varieties. Then we're looking for other institutions, other organizations to take the lead. And Harvest Plus makes sure that the varieties are released, and then we provide technical assistance. So we're looking for funding for those organizations to take the lead, and looking for organizations to partner with.
And if Dr. Hussain, could you address the government role?
I think this question is very important. The question about linking with the government in many of those. I'd like to give example from India. India has a public food grain distribution system. Public food grain distribution system which covers 60% of the population. You know that India has more than 1.2 billion, so that's a very big number. And the government actually procures the grains from the farmers, from the surplus growing countries, is mostly Punjab and Andhra Pradesh, and distribute it throughout the country through the system. So if we could, they actually do it for rice and wheat, but if we could introduce power millet along with that, then it would help reach large number of the people in that. So having discussion with the government and convincing them to sort of introduce this would be very important. In Bangladesh also, we run very large what we call social safety nets program. About 2.5% of the national GDP is spent on that, and there in those programs we are also providing food in kind of rice. So if we could introduce in rice this kind of high zinc rice, then that will achieve both the relief and rehabilitation objective as well as achieving higher nutrition. So discussion, collaboration with the government, convincing them to be part of their program would be very important strategy.
Yes, Namkala, please.
I think a number of things are happening at the policy level. If I use Zambia as an example, the national nutrition strategy there is looking at biofortification as one of the many strategies through agriculture. At the African Union Commission, the African Union has actually declared the want to use agriculture as a strategy to address the nutrition problems on the continent. And biofortification, again, is considered as one of the strategies to look into there. The significance of that is the fact that all the 54 member states of the African Union are signatory to that declaration, which provides a platform for other countries as well to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Namakulo. So we have a question here in the front, and then this next question is back against the wall. Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Tarini Mohan. I work at BRAC USA, mainly on the agriculture program, and I was just wondering why it is that South Africa fares so badly on the breastfeeding metric.
South Africa has had major problems as far as breastfeeding is concerned. One of, I think, the contributing problems is the fact that South Africa happens to be the epicenter of the HIV epidemic. So for the long time, government actually had policies in place that provided formula milk for infants, for mothers who were HIV positive. That might have contributed as well. But there's also recent research that is picking up that there are also some cultural issues that are involved that will need to be tackled. And then to make things even worse, South Africa also has got a very strong formula feeding industry, including companies that are making formula milk. And for a long time, they were allowed to promote formula milk in public institutions, in hospitals and the like. So it is suspected that those might be issues that have been involved. The government has since changed strategies, and the idea is to try and now look at breastfeeding as a key infant and young child feeding. So we're still waiting to see whether that's going to make a difference.
Thank you. We have a question at the back.
Thank you very much. My name is Jess Kinabo. My question is on the issue of seeds. With maize or rice or wheat, what is Harvest Plus looking at the issue of dilution of seeds with seasonal changes? Like if I plant the seed this year, the following year, probably there will be a bit of dilution of vitamin A content in the maize. How is that being looked at Harvest Plus? My other question is, now that we are looking at scaling up biofortification, would it be possible to say, okay, now let us include biofortification in all breeding programs so that we benefit from the technology at a wider scale than just in the few crops that we have identified? Thank you.
Okay, so just to recap, the first question was focused on when farmers are growing these varieties and then they're subsequently growing new generations, is there some dilution of the trait? And with vitamin A especially, what happens there? So that was the first, and the second question about scaling up. So did you want to speak to? Yep.
Yeah, the level of minerals and vitamins in the seeds doesn't deteriorate over time. If you have something like a biotic stress, like a virus, you can lose your resistance to the virus over time. But the mineral and vitamin content is an abiotic property, so it doesn't deteriorate over time. As far as mainstreaming in the I call it mainstreaming in the breeding programs. It's an essential element to the sustainability of biofortification. The vision is that the CGIAR centers, for example, will include these traits in all the varieties that they release, and we're headed toward that. In the beginning, we had to prove the feasibility and the value of biofortification, so we had like parallel breeding programs at the centers. Now we've proven they can be put in high-yielding backgrounds. We've worked out the science of how to do that so we can do it cheaply. And so now we're starting the process with the centers of becoming part of the mainstream breeding programs in those centers. So that really just ensures that over time, all the new varieties with the best agronomic properties, which will be climate smart, so eventually it will be the climate smart crops that the farmers adopt. Those climate smart crops will be biofortified.
Okay, do we have any other questions at the back, please? Come on your left. Oh, sorry.
Hi, my name is Buck Bradshaw with World Vision. I was just wondering, you put up on the screen a list of key partnerships that are essential for scaling up, and I was wondering, particularly for you, Howard, or any of the other panelists, in your experience looking at the global work that you've done so far, which of those partnerships has been the most difficult to engineer or get them on board, and maybe what are some lessons that you've learned from how to do that better?
I don't know if I want to identify the partner that's been the most difficult. Well, I don't know how to.
Maybe the challenges.
Don't know. What? Any ideas?
Or perhaps
reframe it in a positive way.
What might be some lessons for us for each of the different types of partnerships? Maybe one or two key lessons.
Well, let me talk a little bit about the partnership with World Vision. It's Harvest Plus is small, and World Vision is obviously very huge. And we had a key, we had maybe, let's say, 5 or 6 key people in World Vision who learned about biofortification and thought it would be a good idea for World Vision to get involved in biofortification. And it was a 3-year process of working out. First we had to discuss what would be the responsibilities of Harvest Plus, what would be the responsibilities of World Vision with that small group of people. And then that small group of people had to convince the larger World Vision organization that this was something worthwhile. You have different institutional cultures, and then we started having meetings with one another to start discussing, well, which countries can we work in? And and the people at the meetings had to be basically taught about the ins and outs of biofortification. So it was a process, and now recently, then the success of the process, because we both believed in what we were doing, it's not. I don't think I'm supposed to say this, but it's not official yet. But in December, the Canadian government will give a grant to World Vision, so that we can work together in 4 countries. So partnerships are not simple, they're not easy, but they're very worthwhile when you take the time to work them out.
Anne-Marie, might you comment from your experience in Uganda?
You know, when you work on the ground and you throw out an idea to your partners, you have to expect that there will be innovation. And that takes it out of your hands and it changes. And I think that applies as you go up into bigger partnerships, is that when you put it out and you ask for partnerships, it evolves. And we have to be willing to move and evolve with those partnerships. But I perhaps I'm naive, but I think that puts us in a better position, all of us in a better position, because you've harnessed the creativity of a lot of different partners to move forward. So for me, it's a very positive way to go.
If I could, Dr. Hussain, if you could comment as well, please, because we were talking yesterday and you said that BRAC is probably the second largest NGO in the world after World Vision. So, and you're in Africa now. How are you building partnerships?
We have about 150,000 employees and a budget of 700 million within Bangladesh. And as I said, that we strongly believe in scaling up, and we are working with the government in many of the areas. As Howdy has mentioned, partnership is not very easy. You have to sort of work together in those kind of sort of areas. We ourselves expressing interest to sort of collaborate with the Harvest Plus to take up particularly delivery of hygiene rice within Bangladesh. We have a very good network of about, we reach about 100 million sort of households with our health program, with the number about 100,000 health volunteers working in each of the villages in those. So that could be a sort of infrastructure that can be used to disseminate these varieties on to a very large kind of areas. And I know from my experience that if some farmers grow it, the other farmers watch what is happening, and if they sort of are convinced that this is something which is much better than what they are doing, within 2-3 years it will spread in the whole village. So you can target a few sort of households within a village, and then the action will take on its own path for dissemination on those. I think the point that was made earlier about the contamination is a very good one, because you have to replace the seed, and the seed replacement rate is usually quite low in many of the developing countries. But we have to convince the farmers that you need to go for regular seed replacement, even not 1 year, after 2 years or 3 years, in order to keep the good traits into the new seed, and also having the sort of high yield that it contains. The point that was made about the mainstreaming of nutrition, we have been talking about this, but it's often difficult to convince the government or the national agricultural research institutions to do that. But I think this is an absolute must, that we must have the nutrition trait incorporated into the other sort of traits that the scientists are working on. Because if they develop a high yielding variety with good agronomic traits, it can move out the varieties which have the nutritional traits out in the market. So it's a very important kind of sort of issue, and we need to take this up with the agricultural scientist community as well as with the government.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Lerner with Bread for the World Institute, and I was just wondering, have you found, or really more, what have you found to be the gender differences in terms of which kind of producer groups you're working with, whose livelihood is changing, who's earning money, and who's sort of in charge of whether or not the family adopts the foods?
Anna Marie, do you want to speak on this?
Yes, that's a nice question. It sort of depends on the crop that you're dealing with. So we know that sweet potato is a crop of home consumption, as is cassava. That tends to fall into the responsibilities of the women who are feeding the families, but not exclusively. As soon as any money is going to be made, though, the men get involved. With the crops such as beans, it's both men and women involved. It's also a crop of home consumption, but also being sold into the markets. Maize is again both, but we are seeing more hybrid varieties, and so as Dr. Hussain has mentioned, you want a regular replacement of seed. That means that there have to be resources in the household to buy new seed each year, and people tend to budget as a household for that. And again, once things are marketed, we do see, of course, that men are more involved, and as things get in higher scale production. I think decisions at the household level, I wouldn't want to make a broad generalization. I think that you have to sort of look at the crop and the country and the people group, and so there are great variations there. Yeah.
Thanks, Anna-Marie. So please go ahead. Oh, we've got two? Sorry, one here, and then we'll go next. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Inge Brouwer. I'm from Wageningen University. I have actually two questions. like you rightly said, is that biofortified crops is a part of dietary diversification. And I think it's important also to include in your promoting of biofortified crops, also promoting other food-based recommendations. So biofortification on its own can also be a platform, to support dietary diversification. Has that been thought of? Then secondly, of course, we have to reach urban population. But if I look at the pictures, I see very nice packaged products. And we know that these products are often containing a lot of sugar, a lot of salt, a lot of fat, and then the wrong fats. Do you think it's also the responsibility of Harvest Plus to pay attention to that in order to prevent the other part of the malnutrition?
Thank you. Namakula, do you want to speak to both those questions, in fact?
I think there's definitely a move, at least from Harvest Plus, to look at the biofortified crops as a part of a wider diversified diet. People cannot survive on staples alone, so it should really be just a component of a more diverse diet, and it definitely does offer a platform on which to address the diversity of diets in a broader sense. In terms of the processing activities that would then come as offshoots from the products of biofortification, I think I see it would be difficult for Harvest Plus necessarily to control the quality of the products that are processed. And I think that should fall under the wider spectrum of food quality control through the relevant national policies and the like. The reason I'm saying this is because these are now individual private sector companies coming on board using the biofortified foods as raw materials. And I think once it goes out there, then it's no longer in Harvest Plus hands to say, you can use biofortified foods, but you shall not do 1, 2, 3, 4. It becomes a legislative organization, which I do not think Harvest Plus is structured to do. So I think those are issues that nutritionists need to pick up as more fortified products come on board based on the foods that come out of biofortification within the wider realm of regulation of foods.
Please go ahead, Harry.
Yeah. When we did the dissemination of orange sweet potato in Mozambique and Uganda, one of the things we wrestled with in the program was how much additional nutrition information to give when we gave the nutrition messages. And I think we really erred on the side of too much, too many sessions and too much nutrition information, simply because it really increased our costs greatly, and we couldn't. At that level of cost per household, we couldn't scale up really cost effectively. So there's a tension. You want to tell them about the vitamin A, certainly in the sweet potato, and probably relatively inexpensively you can tell them about other vitamin A products, other vitamin A foods that they should be eating. So within a limited amount of time, you can give them other nutrition messages. But what we did was have like 4 or 5 different sessions with all sorts of different nutrition messages. And our results showed that it was basically the vitamin A message that got them to adopt the crop. And so that's been our strategy. I don't think that in terms of the packaged products, I very much agree with what Namakolo said. But oftentimes those packaged products, really the vitamin A isn't really going to have an impact in terms of the level of vitamin A, and they tend not to be our target audiences. But the most important thing is because they're part of the value chain, they're in the marketing system, and it's very important for the farmers. They won't adopt our crops unless there's a demand. They can sell part of what they grow. So it's good that it's in the value chain, and there's a demand by food processors for them. There's a benefit of that for the rural farmers.
Thank you, Howdy. Please.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dr. Tom Herlihy from one of your partners, Land O'Lakes. It was really a pleasure to work with Harvest Plus in Zambia on the orange vitamin A fortified maize. I was really glad to hear you say, Howie, that you're going to be mainstreaming the biofortified foods through the CGIAR system, working with, I imagine, IITA and the International Rice Research Institute and so forth. There's an opportunity right now to work with Monsanto on the water-efficient maize for Africa. So I wanted to ask you if you've started to explore that or not.
Well, in general, we want to work with private seed companies, and any opportunity that we have, we'd like to do that. This particular opportunity with Monsanto, this is the first I've heard about it, so we'll see. We can explore that.
Great, thank you. So the panel, Howdy painted a picture of reaching $1 billion, scaling up to reach $1 billion, 2030. That's 15 years away. And so Harvest Plus biofortification is at a tipping point. You know, it's scaling up in 30 countries. But what do people think? I mean, can we get to that 1 billion? You know, everyone's been quiet on that target. And actually, Bonnie's smiling. So I'm going to ask her to actually give us her perspective. Yeah. So Bonnie started the communication team at Harvest Plus. She worked here many years. She knows the program intimately. I worked with her. I learned a whole lot. And she's moved on to GAIN and working more broadly on fortification. So she has both the insider and the outsider perspective now for several years. So Bonnie, what you've heard today, what you know, where is this going? What do you see as the challenges? What do you see as opportunities? And you can do this. You know all this. So we'd love to hear from you.
Yasser. Well, it's nice that we were actually infants when we started at Harvest Plus. So I think the billion is, it's a lot. It's doable. I'm coming from the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, and they also are trying to reach over $1 billion with fortified foods. They've gotten close, actually, in 10 years. And the way they've done that is through this the private sector mechanism, as Howdy's talking. We need to move demand and not just look at the supply mechanisms and what's working from supply. The private sector has gotten fortified foods to nearly 1 billion people with our model. So we've looked at it from several ways. One way is to say, through national fortification alliances, in the case of fortified foods, we actually have gotten it into policy whereby fortification is law. Okay? So it would be any new releases, actually it's law that they need to be nutritionally dense, or the nutrition of the preferred varieties. But in the case of a lot of fortified foods, it's only the private sector driving it now. You create the incentives, you align the incentives for nutrition with profit. And we need to bring the profit motive into this to get to the billion. And then I think you go beyond the billion. You can go to 2 billion if you've got the private sector driving it. And it embeds sustainability. You know, it's one thing if farmers are producing it 1 year. It's another if they have a demand and a market for this to continue on, because farmers are nimble private sector. They will move away from maize if they can get a better price for rice. So we need to be very sure that the private sector demand is pulling these foods consistently into the market to get it to the consumer. Ultimately, it's the consumer that you're looking at. So I think you need all partners on board, but that private sector is a key to get it to billions.
Thanks, Bonnie. I knew you would have something worthwhile really to share with us. Would anyone like to remark to that? Howdy, please.
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. Demand is very important. I have 2 examples that I want to give. In India, rice and wheat are subsidized, and there's a huge amount of money that the government spends to procure and distribute rice and wheat in India. We've talked to government officials about preferentially buying the high zinc wheat and the high zinc rice for their food subsidy system. The yields of our varieties are just as high as the yields of the normal varieties. And the government officials, they understand, whoa, the same price and you get better nutrition in the varieties. That's a great idea. we could do a pilot test if you had 200,000 tons or something like that to give us, can we buy it from you in the next month? And we said, well, we're not there, we're not quite there yet. We don't have that much seed, we don't have that much production. But you can see it happening in the future because of that value proposition. The value proposition is for the same price, you get added zinc. Okay, that's the example from Asia. Then the example for Africa is simply the orange color can drive the demand. Right now it's a constraint because Africans aren't used to seeing orange maize. They don't like the color. But once the message gets out and you get a certain number of people, a crucial number of people consuming it and saying, hey, it tastes good, it's good for our family, then again, the value proposition is if I switch to orange maize, I protect my family from vitamin A deficiency for the same price. To me, it's just a no-brainer choice. So I think that's the ultimate sustainability is creating that demand. First, you have to create the knowledge, and then you create the demand.
Great, thank you. So let's take one more question if there are any. Anyone got any more questions, either for Bonnie or for the panel? No? Okay, in that case, what I think I'll do is I'll ask we're close to wrapping up time anyway, so I will ask the panelists if they've got any closing remarks or thoughts based on, what you've heard today from the audience and what people have raised. So we might start, actually, Dr. Hussain, if we could start with you, we'll just move this way.
As I said that and for that sort of demonstrating the economic value of those, I think IFPRI has started doing work about how much GDP you can save through sort of working on nutrition and others. Many of those kind of studies, it has to be robust and others. I don't think that these studies are very simple in that sense, but those studies would be very useful for bringing the economic ministries on board. It's not necessarily sort of working with the health ministry. Thank you.
I think the different partnerships are extremely important, and I think the driving force to reaching $1 billion is if the various partners can actually see a benefit to them getting involved in the process. And I think the stage has been set quite positively in that not only has it been shown that the yields would not suffer from biofortification, but also that the nutrient status can also improve without drastically changing the diets of people. And I think that's a very positive message to take forward. And within that context, the various partners can see a role for themselves and a benefit to moving forward, then I think the wheel will keep moving. Thank you.
Howdy, please.
Okay. We haven't presented many numbers at the seminar. This is IFPRI, and IFPRI people like a few numbers. I'm from IFPRI. I like numbers. Harvest Plus, in 2015, Harvest Plus reached 2 million farmers with biofortified seeds or vines or stems. And we're fairly confident that we're going to be able to reach 3 million farmers in 2016 with our staff in place and our plans in place. And of course, that's grown from smaller levels in previous years because we've just been distributing crops for 3 years now. We've run our simulation models, and to reach 1 billion people, we think we have to get up to a rate of distributing crops of about 25 million per year. So we have to go from 2 or 3 million this year up to 25 to 30 million in 2030. So as long as we find the right partners, and as long as we can get the funding, and it's highly cost effective, we think we can do it. So what I tell our partners, I say, if you have a program with a staple food crop, if you have a program with rice or wheat or cassava or beans, come to us and we'll replace one for one the varieties that you're using with a biofortified variety. By doing that, you don't give up any productivity. In some cases, you gain productivity. And by doing that, you've added a nutritional dimension to your program at no cost. Thank you.
Great. Let's give a round of applause to our panel.